Are you there? Hello? Steve, are you there? Steve, are you there? Steve, are you there? Steve, can you hear me? No, I got you. I got you. You can hear me now. All right. All right. Yep, we're okay. I'm getting ready to get us on the air. Hold on for a second. I wasn't born for this fancy automation, you know. All right. We are live, just a couple seconds late, here on 102.9 KPOG and live on Facebook. We have, I haven't been in the studio since the virus hit. And I've always told you I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Well, I'm proving it today. However, my special guest for today is online. Steve, how are you? Good for you. You must have a better yard than I do, because the enemy's always hanging around me. All right. Well, it's nice talking to you again. It's been a while. God bless you and your family and the work that you do for this state. I want to make sure, and I'm just going to say this live, I want to make sure I don't say anything that offends you, because I'm a little sideways today with some people and what they're saying about you. So I want to say right up front, the opinions of J. Michael McCoy are not those of Steve King, or the audience, or the owners, or, you know, whoever you think you are. They're my opinion and only my opinion. So let's start with your running again for your, what, 6th term? See, I should ask first, because I yeah, it's I don't know if Andrea told you. Andrea is your right hand person assistant, but I don't talk politics much anymore. I'm just kind of a straight Jesus freak on the radio. But I wanted to have you on. I specifically called Andrea to see if you would be on the radio with me, because I am I just hate all the commercials and all that's running, that people are saying. I don't think they're saying truthful things about you. So I guess I thought I'd get it straight from the horse's mouth, and you're the horse. I'm going to start out with what's the most important to me. Now, I have a not tremendous. I respect Bob Vander Plaats. I wouldn't say we are friends. I would say that we are allies in a fight for life. But I don't understand, and I'm going to use some harsh words here, Steve. I think he betrayed and he abandoned you. And I have called him and asked for his opinion, and he has not called me back. So before I get my feathers all in a ruffle here, I want to find out how you're feeling about him endorsing a candidate who's running against you.
Well, I surely can speak to that. And, most of the listeners are going to remember what happened a year ago, January, when the New York Times printed that phony story that had the misquote in it that alleged that it was interpreted, even the misquote was interpreted as if I had somehow wondered why there was anything wrong with those two odious ideologies, which I don't identify anymore because somebody will misquote me if I say them.
Yeah.
I was defending Western civilization. It's clear to people whose brains work and who want an objective truth. But when that unloaded, first, I knew that was coming, Mac. I got a heads-up warning from a top-level political operative whom I do respect, and he was right. The day before Thanksgiving of 2018, he said, they're coming after you again. The election was behind us, and all of that garbage dumped over my head then. The election was behind us. He said, they're coming at you again. They believe that they can force you to resign if they can turn the focus of all of the media guns on you and broadside you relentlessly until you capitulate and resign. And I kind of passed that off in the conversation because it was so improbable. I couldn't get my mind around it. And he brought it back again and again. And he said, they have chosen a messenger. The messenger is to go to the president, convince the president to send out a negative tweet against me, and that will be the trigger that unloads all guns on you. All media, the left, and the never-Trumpers, and the elitists and the establishment Republicans are all going to come after you. And so he said, my advice to you is preempt that with the president if you can, preempt it with the messenger if you can. Well, I did preempt it with the president, and he has been hands-off on this thing all along. But I went to see the messenger on January 8th, and the messenger said what any messenger would say is, oh, I would never do that to you, Steve. But I knew I was sending a message up to the people who were strategizing that I knew what was up. That was January 8th. January 9th, Randy Feenstra announced that he would run against me. Out of nowhere. All he did to get ready to run against me was delete 10 years of his Twitter account and started fresh with his tweet that said he's running against me. And then he didn't yet even have a website up or any rollout plan. It was like somebody called him and said, you're going to be a candidate tomorrow because King's got us figured out. The following day, the New York Times story came out, and the rest just came down on me. And within about a day, Bob Vander Plaats is on CNN trashing me. And so, how did all this come about and what was it about? Not one of those people that have unloaded on me with their criticism called me. Every one of them has my cell number, by the way. Not one called and said, what's the truth? But everything I've said on this has held up to all scrutiny, and it's all been all the truth as I know it. And so why would Bob Vander Plaats do that? Well, one of them is, there's if you have matching vowels in your last name, you've got a certain natural affinity, and that's part of Northwest Iowa. We just know that, Max, and so I don't necessarily begrudge that component, but I think there's more to it, and it was this, that when Bob Vander Plaats was running for governor, he had an erroneous constitutional philosophy that he was pushing in that campaign hard, and that was that since it says in our Constitution that the governor is the chief magistrate, he believed that would make him superior to the Supreme Court and that he could overturn their decisions by executive edict, which I told him, Bob, that chief magistrate is just an archaic term for governor. That's where we parted philosophical company, and I no longer support him for governor. I said, don't divide the state and create a constitutional crisis in a governor's race over something that can't be sustained, that isn't right. And he walked away from that conversation and went out with his public announcement that he could be the chief magistrate and overturn the Supreme Court. So that's when I didn't say anything very vocal, but I just stopped supporting him. And then when Terry Branstad needed to name a lieutenant governor, there's a large group of people from Northwest Iowa, right in my backyard up here, that got together to nominate Bob Vander Plaats for lieutenant governor. And when I listened to that, I'm thinking, would you like to run for governor with the guy that would be your lieutenant governor that'd be constantly trying to undermine you because he wants your job? That doesn't work. And so at the convention, I nominated Kim Reynolds for lieutenant governor. And she only won by a handful of votes. So here's a couple of things happened. One is that it's just very likely that Kim Reynolds wouldn't be governor today if I hadn't done that. She doesn't seem to be very appreciative. And also, Bob Vander Plaats has to believe that he would be governor today if I hadn't done that. So this is a payback. And whatever he says, I don't believe it. It's a payback. And I knew it the instant that he went on CNN that day. And then he called me a month or two later, and he said, I just called to tell you that man-to-man, more or less, I'm going to man up to this. I'm going to tell you I'm going to endorse Randy Feenstra. And I said, Bob, I thought you'd already done that. Well, no, I hadn't. Well, that's what he really did when he went on CNN and trashed me that day, clear back in January of 2019. So that's the core of it. Without a lot of flair, that's the core of what's up. And there's this political inertia thing. For every action, there's an equal and opposite and sometimes excessive reaction or overreaction. I was doing what I believe to be altruistically right with the Constitution and with who should be the lieutenant governor and ally of the nominee for governor. And both of those things were constitutionally and altruistically correct, but they offended people's aspirations. And so that's where we are today with Vander Plaats. And by the way, Vander Plaats, of course, he's running ads against me. And he and Randy Feenstra teamed up when I gave a speech at the West Des Moines conservative group out at the Living History Farms at the Machine Shed. And there I defended the babies that were conceived as a result of rape and incest. And they ran 4 different fundraising mailers attacking me for that. And they say, Randy Feenstra is 100% pro-life, so is Bob Vander Plaats, but we can't have Steve King defending these babies that are conceived as a result of rape or incest. And I say, they are as precious to God as my own grandchildren are to God or to me. And so they're 100% pro-life, but I reserve the right to attack Steve King anytime I see fit. And that mark goes against them big time. That National Right to Life has endorsed Randy Feenstra because I called them out for killing the heartbeat bill. I wrote the heartbeat bill and pushed it through Congress to 174 co-sponsors and had the votes to pass it out of committee and the floor. But the leadership in the House, being Paul Ryan, Kevin McCarthy, and Steve Scalise, all handed a veto card over to National Right to Life, who are incrementalists, who will never get rid of Roe versus Wade, who block the efforts to do that, and we will never put an end to abortion in America as long as National Right to Life has a veto card to play in the United States House of Representatives. I called them out on it. I went to the floor with posters. I did press releases on them. I let the world know who they are. Well, they're out here supporting Randy Feenstra out of spite because I have shined the spotlight on them and their activities, which are killing off the heartbeat bill. They literally killed the heartbeat bill, and they're the only pro-life organization supporting Randy Feenstra. So I put a lot of material in there that would be a surprise, I think, to a lot of your listeners, Mac, and you know them better than I do. So what did I leave out, or what did I add that was too much?
Well, that's what I would expect from my congressman, so you did just fine. One of the reasons I don't talk politics anymore is because I can't play that game you play. And that's this backstabbing that goes on in politics because you don't do what somebody wants you to do, and then you don't do what somebody else wants you to do. So I just respect you and honor you, and I know you know that, but when I saw that ad on television from Bob Vander Plaats, it says underneath his name CEO of the Leader. What's his organization called?
The Family Leader.
Yeah, and so I called my contacts at the Family Leader, and they said, well, we don't have anything to do with that. We don't have anything to do with what Bob Vanderplatz does and who he endorses. Well, then why does he say he's the CEO of the Family Leader? I mean, it doesn't take anybody older than about an 8-year-old to figure out that there's something fishy there. So I call the Family Leader so I can talk to Bob, and the person who answered the phone told me, one, they can't reach out to Bob if it's on a endorsement thing. That's not allowed. And number two, they sent me a document that said whatever Bob Vanderplatz does not reflect upon the Family Leader when it comes to an endorsement. I don't understand that. What, talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old. I don't understand that.
No, you do understand it, Matt. You do understand it. I mean, that's just a dodge, is all that is. They sent out a document that says that whatever Bob Vanderplatz says does not reflect on the Family Leader, but he's the CEO of the Family Leader, and they put that down under the credits on a television ad. That's like President Trump saying, well, whatever or having his staff say, well, whatever I say isn't being said as president. I'm only saying this as a private individual. So separate those two things. You can't do that. You can't separate who you are and the titles that you have. That's why he's doing this, is because he's the CEO of the Family Leader. If he was running a gas station on the corner up at George, Iowa, he wouldn't be doing these commercials. Although I probably like that person up there better. And so I think that's just phony. It's weasel word phony. Just make it simple.
So do you think, my guest today is Congressman Steve King, and you're listening to Max World Live, living free through forgiveness on KPOG, Grimes, West Des Moines, kpog.org, and also on Facebook. And there are some people that are giving us comments on Facebook. And should you want to ask Steve a question, I will be more than happy to forward that question on.
Whatever the questions might be, I'm happy to answer them, Max.
I know. It just seems like the best people who fight the fight for what they stand for are the ones that are just getting clobbered right now. And I see this wave in not only state government, but United States government, administrative-wise, of the good people being shut down because, I'm just going to say it, because the bad people, the other people, don't know what to say that's productive, so all they do is run other people down. And that didn't used to be a part. When I started on WHO years ago, that wasn't a part of what we did. I remember Tip O'Neill getting into it with somebody on the floor of the House, and then they were playing golf that weekend. The two of them were. What happened to those days? What's changed that we've all become so politically moralless? In other words, without morals, without integrity.
Well, Mac, I'd say a couple of things have happened. One is with the convenience of air travel and the adjustment of the schedules in Washington, there's a lot more members go home every weekend, which I've done for a long time now, and we spend time with our constituents. It's good. We get restored back to reality again, but we're not socializing. When you're in town, like the cycle goes like this: we'll come in on a Monday night and we'll vote at 6:30. Couple of non-controversial, and then we'll work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, fly out early Thursday afternoon. Then the next week we come back, we do Tuesday through Friday, fly out. Then we do that for another week or so, and then it's a week back in the district. So if you're only spending 3 nights a week in Washington and your schedule's as tight as it can be, there's not time to do the socializing. There's not time to relax and get to know people. The only time we do that is on foreign travel when that happens. And that actually most of the time is a good and constructive thing. The other piece is social media that's polarized this country.
Yeah.
They let just anonymous people sit in their living room or their basement and just attack people without consequence, without even identifying who they are. And that's polarized our country. So the culture of it has shifted in that way. And I love the America that we were, the wholesome, faithful, church-going, nuclear family America that raised the patriots, that defended liberty for the world time and time again. We still have the patriots to defend liberty for the world, but we're having trouble keeping it defined. And so I've been about restoring the respect not only for the rule of law, but also restoring Western civilization itself. And I'm under attack for defending Western civilization. I mean, that's what that really was about. And I've been building an organization to restore Western civilization, but it slowed me down a bit with all these attacks that have come on me. But I see where we are with this. Western civilization, I'll define it quickly and shortly, and that is wherever the footprint of Christianity laid the foundation for civilization. That's every square mile of the Western Hemisphere. It's all of Western Europe, most of Eastern Europe. It goes east of Moscow a ways. They get a little confused once you get very far east of Moscow. You can go down along the Mediterranean. That's Western civilization. Also, Oceania, Australia, New Zealand. Today, Japan, even though they aren't very much for Christianity, most of the other values of Western civilization they've embraced. And that's where freedom is protected and respected and revered, freedom of religion, press, assembly. This is the country where we have the right to keep and bear arms, and hardly any other has that anymore. But the blessings to the world that have come out of our culture and civilization are tremendous. And if you pull them out of our society, you wouldn't have very much of anything left. And by the way, we've been ones that have saved that liberty for the world. America has done that. It's fallen to us after the British laid a lot of the foundation. It's fallen to us. And if we had failed along the way, I think that tyranny would have taken over, and it would be imperialists and fascists versus the Marxists, and one side or the other would eventually win. But freedom and Christianity would be expunged from the world. That's how valuable Western civilization is. And I'm under attack for defending it. And my colleagues, some of my Republican friends, some of my elitist, establishment, never-Trumper, globalist Republican friends are attacking me because I'm defending the very civilization that gives them the freedom to do so. And I understand how big this is and how important it is. And they just simply see somebody that's making them feel a little uncomfortable with the truth.
My guest on the landline today is Congressman Steve King, who is running for his 10th term as our congressman. And I don't usually endorse candidates because as a talk show host, I find that to be troublesome. But because I don't talk politics hardly at all anymore, I completely and have most usually supported what Steve King does in Washington for us. And he's my guest on the radio today. Got some questions coming across Facebook. And so here's something you and I have in common. The opponent, whoever they may be, likes to call me a racist, and you're called the same thing. First of all, what do you believe a racist is? And second of all, help me out for a second. I just want to punch him in the nose. I mean, I think it is just a horrible, horrible, horrible thing to say about somebody, unless it's just proof positive that they are. How do you deal with that?
Well, Matt, you heard me chuckle a little bit because I love your attitude. And, I have to be a little bit more patient with some of this. But, yeah, how do you deal with it? That's the cheapest card in the deck, and it's the most dog-eared, worn-out card in the deck. At the beginning of the Republican National Convention in Cleveland in 2016, I was on an MSNBC panel. And let's see, April Ryan was on there. I didn't know her name when I sat down. I know it now. Charlie Pierce, same thing. But in any case, they asked me a question. Oh, I know what it was. Charlie Pierce said, he said, one could be an optimist and hope that this Republican convention is the last one, the last Republican convention where old white people have anything to say about it.
Gee,
They were ready to break for a commercial. I could not let that go. And so I just jumped into him on that. And I said, Charlie, that rhetoric's getting kind of tired. And I invite you to explain to us any other subgroup of people that's contributed more to civilization. Well, that made me a racist. And they were all, April was fanning herself like she had the vapors, and they were all yelling at the same time. And it became a kind of it became a national story for a long time. But in any case, April Ryan ambushed me out at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She and another reporter, both of them was reporters and both of them African American, came in and started to say, "Are you a racist? Are you a racist?" And they didn't ever use a minute of that tape. It was about 80 minutes that we went at it. We have it all on my own tape too. And and I said, use that word over and over again. Say it 1,000,000 times, because every time you say it, it becomes worth less and less. It's worn out, it's dog-eared, and it has far less meaning. But people get that label, and they run from the label. And we should instead plow right in like I did with April Ryan. She didn't get a minute out of 80 minutes of audio tape between her and another reporter that they could use against me, and that was why they ambushed me, was to try to get me to say something that they could use. But if you look at this, it's a weaponized term, and they since weaponized. In fact, George Soros presided at the Occidental Mandarin Hotel in Washington D.C. starting on November 12th. If that's the Sunday after Trump was elected president in 2016. They were going to gather together to talk about how they were going to exploit the Hillary presidency, but of course they had to instead figure out how they were going to deal with the Trump presidency. And one of the things they did was weaponize terms. Racist was long weaponized and worn down. And so they picked white nationalists and white supremacists as two of them that they were going to use. There were others, Nazi, fascist, anti-Semite. Those were all part of their lexicon also. But we went back and tracked the use of white nationalists on LexisNexis from the year 2000 on up until that point, that day when Soros arrived at the Occidental Mandarin Hotel, and the term white nationalist had only been used, I would say, virtually unused. That means 1 to 200 times a year by any scholar or anything. Right immediately from that point forward, the rest of that year, which was a little over a month and a half, it was used 10,000 times.
Oh.
The next year it was used 30,000 times, and the next year still up there at 20,000 times. They weaponized that term, and then they used it to bludgeon me. That's the fact of what's going on. So we can't let them own this language. If they can own the language, they can own the policy. I mean, this was pretty clear in George Orwell's 1984.
Yeah.
You can control the language, and they control the language, and we let them, like we're too stupid to understand that if they start calling us names and we let them get away with it, after a while, and by the way, how you use and when you use those terms actively changes the definition of those terms. And that's another piece of it, that when I was asked by Dave Price in October of 2018, what is a white nationalist, I hadn't used the term at all. I had never been quoted as saying it. In fact, it wasn't until the New York Times quoted me as saying it. Well, that was actually the reporter, Trip Gabriel, admitted that he fed those terms into the interview. I did not bring them up. So but when they use those terms, I did that definition with Dave Price. I started out fumbling because I hadn't thought about it. I hadn't used the term. I'd never uttered it, and I didn't in that definition. But I said, well, I guess first you'd have to be a white nationalist. First you'd have to be white. Well, then we got Rachel Dolezal, who was, she was blonde-haired and blue-eyed, but she identified as black, so I guess you wouldn't necessarily have to be white. I'm just buying time. And then I said, well, it's a derogatory term. It might have meant something different 1 or 2 or 3 years ago, but today it implies racist. I don't know how it could have been more right. The definition of that term had changed because of George Soros and the hierarchy of the Democrats weaponized it. And I knew it instinctively or intuitively, but I didn't know it factually until we ran the LexisNexis search. And so I just want people to be aware. They weaponize language. They can trigger it. They've got the ability to do that. They've done it. I've tracked it, and I've been the victim of it.
Yeah, I had I had a gentleman, and I've taken the post down, so I don't mind talking about it, but I'm not going to name his name. It's not important. But one of those people that chooses to use liberalism as a mental illness, meaning that they don't have control over what they say or what they do. As you know, my name is spelled like the original Irish name. It's Mckoy. And in a post, he spelled my name Mkkoy.
Oh.
And I called him up. I mean, he was in my phone. I've known this guy 25 years. And I said, you know, I've never made this kind of phone call when there's what I call a keyboard cowboy. That's what I call the people on Facebook. They're keyboard cowboys. They, they somehow get this keyboard courage, similar to what some people would call a liquid courage when they drink too much. And I just called him and I said, this is just outrageous that you would refer to me in this way. Why did you do that? And just, I'm not going to be mad at you, but if you don't have a good reason for you doing it, it's just what you do, then you and I are going to have a challenge together. And he apologized, to his credit. He apologized right off and was very kind to me as a fellow brother in Christ. So, but it's like, and this drives me crazy. You know, people say that the president is a racist, and yet the head of the HUD, Ben, the guy that ran for president, is
Ben Carson.
Yeah, Ben Carson. He's an African American, and the number one doctor in the world, the Surgeon General of the United States of America, is an African American. How does somebody, and this isn't a rhetorical question, I'd really like your opinion. How does someone call a person a racist when two of their top, 12 people, 14 people, 16 people in the administration at that level are African American? I mean, all I want to do is say you're ignorant or you're stupid, one or the other.
You know, Mac, you're right on that, and it's Donald Trump is. I'm sure he's hired more African Americans to work for him than probably any of his critics have, and that record is pretty good too. If you just watch how he handles that, and he's brought a lot of blacks into his side of the aisle. And the events that he has done with pastors, etc., he's reached out very well to the black community. He's growing his support there. You know, I looked at the thing that I went through that we've talked about that began really in earnest on January 10th of 2019. And who came forward? We have over 200 people that are high-profile Americans that signed a document that said that I was railroaded, it was a rotten deal, and they ought to put things back the way it was. One of them was Pastor Bill Owens, who is the head of the black pastors in America, and that put all those pastors that were part of that group on board. A whole group of them came in and filled up my office and all went there and prayed for me. And I'm looking at this, and others came forward. For example, Christopher Harris. We were communicating yesterday by text. He and his wife Tanya. I thought I was going to be in D.C. last night, and we were going to go out to dinner together. It happened to have been my birthday yesterday, and we didn't get that done because I took a plane and came home again. But that was the folks like that, Kevin Jackson, Diamond and Silk. I think Diamond and Silk are going to be calling folks in my district here pretty soon. They've become good friends. Why do these black conservatives come to me? I mean, I'm really not searching them out. I want them empowered. I try to empower them when I can, and I have them as guest speakers. And by the way, I had Diamond as my guest at the State of the Union address just a little over a year ago. So, but why did the black conservatives come to me? Kay Cole James, who was the president of the Heritage Foundation, she called me up and asked me to come visit her right after this came down. And I thought, Kay, it's going to be a woodshed meeting. And I went to her office up on the top floor of the Heritage Building, and I'm just going to look her in the eye, and we're going to have a discussion. If we have to have it out, we'll have it out. Instead, we sat there in that opulent office in the corner that looks out over the Capitol Dome, and she said, Steve, I understand what you're going through, and I want you to know that I'm praying for you, and I know your heart. I know you, and I know your heart. Black conservatives have come behind me to support me over and over and over again. I didn't search them out. They came to me. You know why, Mac? Because they've been through it worse. Black conservatives take it harder than even I do, because when they stand up, they say that they are accused of betraying their race. Just like Joe Biden said, if you're black and you don't know who to vote for, meaning Joe Biden, then you ain't black. That's being characterized as a racist statement. I think is just a naive, stupid thing to say. But that's what they think, is that black people have to vote for Democrats, and that culture exists so that black conservatives that come forward, especially the vocal ones, they are targeted. Candace Owens is targeted. She is an incandescent goddess, as far as I'm concerned, a wonderful gift from God to our society and our civilization. And she's being targeted because she's a black conservative. Kevin Jackson essentially let go at Fox because he was a little bit too harsh. Some people, I thought what he said was fine, but he is a friend and calls me once in a while. And he's a lively individual.
Remind us again. I'm sorry, Steve, to interrupt you. Remind us again what he said that got him booted off.
What? Oh, I don't. Let's see. I have to think that up a little bit. I know what it was. He referred to the women who were attacking Brett Kavanaugh. He used the expression "skank," and that was a little harsh, I admit. But I didn't think he should have lost his job over that. They were trying to ruin this man, and he had, by the way, Kavanaugh had accusers. He had 6 or 7 or 8 accusers. None of them held up to the scrutiny. Look at me. There's not a soul. I have no accusers. There's not one person in a quarter century of public life dealing face to face with tens of thousands of people. There's not one person that's come forward and said that they've ever had a disrespectful or disparaging experience with me, whether or not it had anything to do with race, ethnicity, or national origin or sexual orientation even. Not one person. I have no accusers, but yet I've been struck from the slate because I'm too honest and too strong, and I make some of our Republicans feel uncomfortable because they don't want to do what our platform says we want to do. They're blocking it, and I'm pushing it. Heartbeat bill is one of them. Marriage is another, and I think that throughout all this time, here's the definition. What's different within the party? We're back to another battle between the establishment wing of the party, the never Trumpers, the globalists, and neocons, and all those folks, versus the grassroots, full spectrum constitutional Christian conservatives. And here's the difference: the establishment people in this party, whom I give to them everything they want, they just don't like it when they get more than they want. This establishment wing believes that society is always growing, evolving, and changing, and that it can never revert back to where it was. There's always going to be some kind of a progression that takes us into a future where we drop off values, reassess values, and their job is, they believe it is, to stay abreast of that or ahead of it so they can stay in power and be leaders. Conservatives believe that a sin is the same sin today as it was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
There are timeless truths anchored in God and nature's God, and they cannot be changed. And we need to recognize that and live in the wholesome way within God's law. That's why we have this struggle in the Republican Party. And they don't like it. And for me, I can live with the establishment wing of the party, just provided they don't have to attack me for these values that are God's values.
Congressman Steve King is my guest today, and for those of you listening, you're wondering why I'm talking politics today. It's because I think there's a great... I don't think... Well, I want to be careful here. I don't think I've ever witnessed such an abandonment and betrayal as Bob Vanderplatz is doing to you. Now, am I just naive and living under a rock in Des Moines, Iowa, and this goes on all the time in politics? Or is this as upsetting to others as it is to me?
Well, Mac, I'm hearing a lot about it, and there's people that are just lining up and saying, that they're just going to separate themselves from that wing. And I don't want to say that the family leader hasn't done good work. I've worked with him on this. But
Chuck Hurley's a first-class guy.
Yeah. Chuck and I have prayed together a lot of hours. If you put a stopwatch on it, it adds up pretty well, I think. And but I guess Bob is saying that Chuck Hurley hasn't taken any position that I know of, and that. But he's also, when people are in that circle, they decide, okay, we are going to operate through this cancel culture, so they're afraid to speak up. Chuck Hurley hasn't stepped up to defend me that I know, and why not? And I said, I try to do those things that are altruistic, that do the right thing for the right reason. And whatever Bob's motives are, I think I've described what I believe they are, and what I said to that issue is fact. So he has to answer for it, not me. And I think the voters see through it, and if they don't see through it, then somehow or another this whole thing collapses, and they send a rhino to Congress. Matt, I had a significant respect for Randy Feenstra when this started, but I looked at who's behind him now, and he's got the Rhino PAC, which is the Republican Main Street Partnership. They're for red flag gun laws, and they are the Republican group that killed my repeal of Obamacare. And yes, I ripped them for it, but they were not singularly but substantially responsible to block my repeal of Obamacare. So we still have that, and it's punished every American in some way or another. Then the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, we call them the Chamber of Amnesty, have killed amnesty every time.
Yeah,
so the Chamber of Amnesty is...
I called the leader of one of the chambers here in our community, one of the strongest ones, and said, how come you guys are sponsoring this hit campaign against Congressman Steve King? And of course that person backpedaled and said, well, it was the national group, it wasn't the local group. And I said to this person, I said, then you better tell them to get Chamber of Commerce off of that little thing at the bottom of the ad that says this ad is paid for by, and it says the Chamber of Commerce. So hopefully, I don't know. Can we really change anything?
But it's another one of those dodges, like you heard when you checked in with the family leader. And there's there's scores of cities in the congressional district that are affiliated with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, but not one of them has vouched for that ad, and not one of them that I can find anyway. And furthermore, that ad says Steve King has never passed a farming bill, and he won't sign on to the president's top executives bill, and it gives the bill number. So what bill is that? We looked it up. That's the bill that was introduced by now the president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, in April of 2019, and it has 0 co-sponsors. And Mark Meadows doesn't support it anymore either. But they're using something that phony to attack me. And that's, Mark Meadows would like to pull the bill, but he's not in Congress anymore. He can't even pull it. It's just there. And I won't sign on to a bill that no one else would sign on either, but they chose that. That's what an insult to the people of this state that they would do that. Well, then we've got the Never Trumper PAC, and that has been the Republican Jewish Council or Conference, whichever it might be, the RJC. That's funded in a large part by Paul Singer. Paul Singer is a multi-billionaire vulture capitalist.
Yeah.
He has a son who is gay. He's obsessed with the LGBTQ effort. And he also had bought a whole bunch of Puerto Rican junk bonds. And he's pressing Congress to bail Puerto Rico out. And I'm doing my best to block that because I think he's rich enough. and it shouldn't be taking it out of the pockets of the taxpayers. So he's also a buddy to Bruce Rastetter, and so that's, you tie that together and you can add it up pretty well. But the Never Trumper PAC is the Republican Jewish conference, and they're trying to turn me into an anti-Semite, but my record's too good. I've long supported Israel, and I can say a lot about that. Then we everybody talked about the Kill the Heartbeat bill. That's the Kill the Heartbeat PAC, which is National Right to Life, and there's singular focus. Why would you go after the lead pro-life voice in the United States House of Representatives if you're a pro-life organization? Because they were offended because I outed them. I put the spotlight on who they are, and they got to go if we're going to save 1 million babies a year. And then, by the way, here's another one of these contradictory things going on with Bob Vander Plaat, and that is that the family leader has long been opposed to gambling, and that's clear. It's been one of their missions from a moral standpoint. They're opposed to gambling, and so Randy Feenstra, as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, made the oath and pledge to his constituents, and I presume anybody else that was listening, that he would block any gambling bill that would come through the Ways and Means Committee on a moral ground. But that was 2017, I believe, when he made that pledge, and yet he says he's the architect of the largest tax cut in Iowa history. Well, he's also the architect of the largest expansion of gambling in Iowa history, and so he sat there. He's lost his gavel now, but he was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and he facilitated that bill coming through his committee and voted for it in committee, then against it on the floor. But he knew what the results were going to be when he facilitated the gambling bill coming through his committee. And when asked about it on that other radio station, Mike Damascus, he said, "Well, they would have kicked me off of my committee if I hadn't moved that gambling bill through." And so, can you imagine any leader telling Steve King, "You will move this bill, and if you don't, I'll kick you off of your committee, and take your gavel away"? I'd say, "Go for it, boys." That's what happened. And, you stand on principle. There's a price to be paid. You have to be willing to pay the price.
Right. No, I believe me, my career could have gone differently had I just kissed the right backsides. But I like you, I'm just not that way. When I close my eyes at night, God loves me, and I am the person that He created, and I do what is God's will as much as I possibly can. And when I don't, I'm just a bad guy because I'm pulling away from God, which is called sinful nature, and I know we all get there. But what is this in the commercial about you getting kicked off the Ag Committee?
Well, it's not only the Ag Committee, of course, it's Judiciary and Small Business. I had 3 committees for 16 years. And so when this came down, the New York Times misquote story that triggered all of this, which I knew was coming, but there's nothing I could do beyond what I did to stop it. Then that story came out on Thursday, the 10th of January, 2019. I rejected that quote and the evil ideologies. I went to the floor again on Friday and did the same thing in about a 20-minute speech. I made it utterly clear no one was listening. Kevin McCarthy went on national television and did all the major networks and ginned this thing up. He was not quoted on public television, but he was quoted in the green room saying, "I'm going to kick Steve King off of all of his committees." That was Sunday. Monday, I'm back in Washington, and wait a minute. Sunday morning at 6:30, McCarthy's chief of staff contacted my chief of staff, 6:30 a.m. on Sunday morning. That's not a normal activity.
Yeah, right.
Wanted to know if she could set up a meeting between our bosses on Monday, which they scheduled for 4 o'clock on Monday. And so that way, within an hour, McCarthy was on television, and he's saying, I'm going to have a meeting with King, and there's going to be consequences, and he defined it, but he didn't say off of committees except in the green room. But he went so far out on a limb, there was no coming back for McCarthy, no matter what was going to be said in that meeting. We met at 4 o'clock, and we went around and around. And he was like a prosecutor. But the only information he had is what the New York Times reporter had told him. I also knew what the Times reporter had said because we'd talked to him also earlier that day. And so we got through that meeting, and I said, I can disprove all of this, but it's going to take some time. And he said, how much time do you need? And I said, I knew it couldn't even be done in that, but I said, at least 24 hours. And he said, you've got 1 hour, and walked out of the room. Well, he walked out of the room, and he went to the steering committee and more or less made a pitch to them that they needed to kick me off all of my committees. And apparently it was a voice vote. It was a stampede, and they took McCarthy's word for that. So that's how that happened. And, Mac, in the history of the United States Congress, there have only been 3 other people that have been removed from all of their committees. All 3 of them are convicted federal felons. And they can't even find a rule that I thought about circumventing, let alone violate or federal felony. This is an outrageous thing to do. It usurps my constitutional rights, and it usurps the authority of the electoral process and the people in this congressional district. And it cannot be allowed to stand. And by the way, if the voters go to the polls on Monday and put up a vote for that other guy, and I come in anything other than first place, they will be ratifying that unconstitutional, draconian decision made by Kevin McCarthy and empowering him to suppress or eliminate the freedom of speech of any member of Congress that would be part of his conference. And that's how bad this is. And I have not beat this drum as hard as I should be because I've been playing the long game. The long game got me to an agreement with Kevin McCarthy on April 19th of this year, where he said that he would go to the steering committee and advocate to restore me to all of my committees. And that meant in real time, like within a week or two. Well, now we're down to the 29th of May, so we're a month and 10 days from there. And I went to the steering committee one at a time. I've got a whip card on that. I know he didn't talk to them because I talked to nearly everyone, and none of them had heard from McCarthy. But I've got the votes to put me back on committees. I just have to get it there. I can't call the steering committee meeting, and neither can they. That's all up to Kevin McCarthy. So he holds the cards on this. And I have said to them, there is no truth after the primary. If you can't come around and come clean and send a message out here to this district that you're going to rectify that huge, colossal insult to the people in the 4th District, then there's no truth after the second day of June.
Steve King, Congressman Steve King is my guest, or has been my guest. We're about out of time on this Friday, the 29th day of May. And we're just having a frank conversation about the people that are... It's really... Okay, I'm asking a question here, and if it's unfair for you to answer, you know I respect that. But it just seems that the Democratic machine or the liberal machine has thrown away the nice book, the morals book, the integrity book, and they're going to do anything and everything they can to get a Republican defeated from a national to a local level. And of course that's always what they want, but they're throwing away the rule book. You don't do some of the things that they're doing now. How do you explain that to your voters, that they really have to take the time to see through this and not just pay attention to a 30-second commercial which is filled with lies?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd say that, watching this and being in the middle of this arena for some time now, they have thrown it away a while back, not very far back historically, but Nancy Pelosi I've actually got a decent personal relationship with her. We have not had a crossword. We're congenial with each other when we speak, and that happens intermittently along the way. And she actually helped me when we were working to save the life of J.C. Hermstead, the ALS patient that we just lost here about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
But in any case, here's how partisan this is. And it may just be they're thinking if they can get their way, it's worth it. That the end justifies the means, might makes right. But if you go back into 2006 and 7, when we were ramping up for the surge in Iraq and into the surge in Iraq and the highest casualty rate in all, Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House then, she forced 44 votes on the floor of the House of Representatives that were designed to underfund, or undermine our troops in a time of war. And that was about undermining the president and laying the foundation so that they could elect a Democrat president in 2008. And I'm convinced that it cost American lives. When you have actions on the floor of the House of Representatives that encourage the people that are building IEDs and the ones that are planning those and those that are detonating them, it cost American lives. That's how hardcore and draconian that is. When you watch Adam Schiff go down into that pit in the basement and run secret hearings down there and muzzles even the witnesses that he brought in. He muzzled some of them because they were asked questions he didn't want to answer, and nothing leaked out of there except what Adam Schiff was leaking out of there. That was so deceptive, and 5 of us went down and stormed the skiff one day, and in doing so, that rattled the cages enough that about 24 of us went about 3 days later, and that's what brought Adam Schiff out into the open. But that was about cooking up a plot to impeach the president. And and I've been in the middle of this thing all along. Most of these people that were part of the Russia hoax thing and the Mueller piece, I've had before me in Judiciary Committee under oath that questioned them considerably. And so I know the faces, I know their personalities, their body language, and those kind of things that I've been watching along the way. But this, the idea that if you're going to be an FBI agent, or director of the FBI, or the director of national intelligence, or the CIA, and or a highly ranking Department of Justice official, all the way up to Loretta Lynch, by the way, and you can use the powers of that office to unmask, investigate, and persecute a presidential candidate, a president-elect, and then a seated president of the United States. That's a Democrat ideology. And somehow they justify that and rationalize that in their own mind. And I don't understand that. But that's nothing as corrupt as that has ever happened in the history of this country that I know of. And I've called this worse than Watergate a long time ago. Yeah. And I also I'm on record as saying Barack Obama, the trail leads to Barack Obama. I don't know if we're quite going to get his fingerprints on it, but the trail leads to him, and I'm judging by some things that I heard him say that fit within the fact pattern that we have. So I want this cleaned up. I want the perpetrators punished. I want to clean out that evil element in the upper crust, and let's let America be fresh and alive and back to God-given liberty again. It's a long, hard task, and I don't know if we can get it done.
Well, Steve, I hope that thanks for being on the radio with me today, and I believe you're going to be reelected because I believe most of the people in your district know you and know who you really are, and they're not going to be swayed by low information or incorrect information ads or voters. So we're out of time, but I want to thank you for taking your time today, and thank you for all the work you do in Washington. Jesus loves you, and thanks for just being Steve King.
Well, Mac, I thank you a lot. I got a whole hour of therapy with you today, so I appreciate it, and I appreciate God's blessings on you and me and all of us that are listening here today. Thanks a lot, Mac.
You bet, Congressman. I appreciate you and look forward to seeing you again.
Indeed.
All right, that has been Steve King here in this time. An unusual interview because I just wanted to give Steve the opportunity to have a voice against those voices that are just lying, cheating, and stealing. And somebody's got to call them out. And I guess I'm fearless enough to do that. Or I'm dumb enough, one or the other. No, I'd say fearless. How about you? I'm J. Michael McCoy. If I have not thanked you for listening, I appreciate it. Love my job. Couldn't do it without you. right here on KPOG and webcast1live.com.